Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed, and I have in the studio with me today Mr. Marshall Williams, who's a crisis mentor with Running Rebels. We have Dante Holmes, the Assistant Director of Mentoring Program from Running Rebels, as well as Michael Peoples, who is an Executive Assistant, And then we have a former mentee of Mr. Williams by the name of Nicholas Truall. So good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So we're going to be talking about the mentoring connection, the importance of role models in the lives of youth who are considered to be, or just at risk, or just youth in general. So we're going to talk about that today. How are you all doing?
Doing well. Pretty good.
So now, Running Rebels. Running Rebels is an organization that provide, what services do Running Rebels provide?
We have a number of services that are ranging from a general rec area where young people can come in and have some very safe, positive recreational activities to partake in, as well as our tutoring after-school program, music program. We have a multimedia program that allows young people to delve into videography, photography, graphic arts. There's a long list of them, but from the athletic program as well as our youth entrepreneur program.
A youth entrepreneur program?
Teaching young people the,
financial literacy. And
exactly. Business practices.
Oh, great. So let's go just over those services that you offer once again, because there was a lot, and I think they're really important.
Sure.
So what are those services again? There's youth entrepreneurship.
We have a youth entrepreneurship program, a music program. We have a multimedia program. We have our after-school program, which is the general recreation area. We have tutoring program, a mentoring program. We have, as well as, we call it the ladies program, young ladies program.
Because I think a lot of times when I think of Running Rebels, I often think about a lot of male mentors and young boys. So you actually have a female component to your program.
Correct.
And what services do you offer to that population?
They have the exact same opportunities
access
as the
to
young
all
men.
those services.
Correct.
Oh wow. So how many students or children are you working with right now in your program?
Over the year, any given year, it's 2,000 plus.
2,000 plus students. Wow.
And any given day, we probably have between 30 and 40 young people in the building.
So are these children basically located in the central city? Are they from suburban communities? Are they from a variety of locations? Where are your clients coming from?
Easiest way to say that is they are a variety of locations. There are young people that have known about us through the basketball program and may come as far as Brown Deer. We have young people right in the community that are within walking distance. So, yeah.
Okay. So you have about 2,000 youth that you serve on an annual basis, and on any given day you have about 40 students in there, and they're accessing all these different programs. Now, do these programs run daily, or are they set schedules? Like for example, your multimedia program or your entrepreneurship program, do they offer classes? Okay, so you have an activity schedule here.
Yep. So each month there's a calendar that goes out that has regular programming per day.
Now, I also see something on here like the IMP AOTA group.
Correct.
So is that working with young people who have AOTA issue, alcohol and other drug abuse issues?
Per court orders only, yes.
Okay, per court order. So now what is the ATAC group?
That's actually our aftercare program for some of those young people that have completed that IMP program, and they now have the opportunity to volunteer for additional services that would help them complete that first year off of probation successfully without reoffending.
Okay, so like on Monday's night, it says here from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. that you all offer tutoring services. So is that tutoring services open to, is it a membership base or?
No, the mentoring program is pretty much open to our core group of rec youth that come in throughout the day. So if they're coming in, they're our rec kids, they are offered our tutoring program as well as the other programs as well, the IMP, the mentoring programs. Mentors bring their youth down sometimes for tutoring as well. So the tutoring is pretty much open to our general rec.
Okay.
It's kind of intertwined. So our general rec, when they come in, they have to do about 30 minutes of tutoring. It's about 30 minutes of tutoring. They come in and do some academic work first, and then they're able to interact with the recreational activities that we have.
How do the children respond to that? Because I like that piece. You're saying that it's a requirement. They do actually 30 minutes of academic focus activities, and then that allows them now to engage in all the other services that you offer. What is typically the response from the young people?
It's a pretty good buy-in. The youth come in, even if they don't have homework, they go back and the tutors give them worksheets and things that's on their grade level to complete. Every now and then you have ones that try to sneak through the cracks and say, I'm not going back to tutoring, but they eventually go. So the buy-in is very good. The youth come in, and a lot of them want to get the help, so they understand that they need the additional academic support, so they want to come down there. Some youth come down there just for the tutoring. They don't engage in their recreational activities. They come down there specifically to get the tutoring help.
And again, these are youth who are on your caseload, so it's not just
general.
It's just general, just an open door.
As well as our caseloads.
Okay, so let's look at that. You are located where?
1300 West Fond du Lac, which is pretty much on the corner of 13th and Vine.
Okay, so that's the Running Rebels Community Organization at 1300 A West Fond du Lac Avenue in Milwaukee, and the phone number there is 414-264-8222. And the reason why I really want to make sure the community knows how to access that, because if you're saying that you're offering tutoring services a couple times a week, I think that's really great. So let's talk about how can children get into your program? How do they become a part of the Running Rebels community?
I'm going to go ahead and
it's twofold. I'll let him.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and share the reality of where we're at right now with the December calendar coming to an end. We had to make some changes based on some funding, and I don't think it's necessary to go into the politics of it or what have you, but the reality is at this particular time we're looking at restructuring our program based on the funding that we have for 2015.
Okay.
At this current time, we're able to only serve those that have been a part of the program in the past, and we are doing our best to make sure that due to funding cuts, we continue to have those services and doors open to those individuals, but we strategically have to look at how that looks in 2015.
Because at the end of the day, funding drives everything.
Correct.
Funding drives everything, and this is just me talking. A lot of times I think that the programs that really need the dollars the most are the ones who are hit the hardest. So at this time, you kind of have to focus on serving the population of youth who are on your caseload.
In our caseloads, in our groups, or that are have already been a part of our core group of recreational.
I just invited everybody in the city to come down there and run it, bro.
I know. When I saw you do it, I was like, uh-oh.
My bad, Mr. Barnett. Okay, so let's talk about how long have you all I mean, I know you all are in administrative positions, but were you once formerly mentors?
As well as being a director, I had a caseload as well of mentees, and I've been mentoring since about 2005. So
2005, okay.
With Running Rebels. Prior to that, I've just been working with youth since probably after college. So it's been almost 20 years. So.
Okay, Mr. Peoples.
And for myself, I've had the privilege to come on board through mentoring in 2007, and have taken advantage of some of the internal opportunities within the organization to move up, and it's been wonderful. So to be a part of the court-ordered programming, mentoring, the recreational area, and administration has allowed me to pretty much get a full understanding of the programming and the population we're trying to help here.
So is there a difference between the court ordering program and the mentoring program? Is that
yes?
Am I here to say one is with the
our specific mentoring program is referral based, okay. And then our court ordered is also as well is referral based through the court systems.
Okay. So now, Mr. Williams, now we've been knowing each other a long time. This is old friend here. We've been at least 15 years.
Yes.
Okay. So Mr. Williams, tell me how long have you been providing mentoring?
Informally, I've been providing mentoring for almost 40 years.
Wow, 40 years. Now, how did you get started?
How did I get started?
What was the impetus? What was the motivation? Did you just, when you were a young boy, you said, I'm going to grow up and dedicate 40 years of my life?
As a young man in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it was the children in the neighborhood that were on the streets.
Oh, wow.
And I just engaged him in positive things to do, and that's just been my thing to do since then.
So you started in Pennsylvania, and then you
Yes.
relocated to Wisconsin at some point, and then how did you get connected to mentoring locally?
Okay, how I got connected to mentoring locally was I worked for GE in Waukesha in 1994 when I came to Milwaukee, and I was watching the news one evening and saw some of the negative things that were happening in the city. And I made a comment to a coworker at GE, and she told me in not too polite words to get off my you know what, and go down and do something.
And I think there's a message because a lot of times we hear people who complain about what the conditions are, and I try to watch the news as least as possible, but a lot of times we're aware that there's issues going on, but it's easier to talk about it than to actually do something about it. So that's a real great PowerPoint there, to get up and do something. And so what you did was you got in contact with a local organization.
Actually, my mentoring started out as tutoring at actually Clark Street School.
Okay.
After my third shift job at GE, I would come to the school in the morning, and for 4 days a week, I would tutor third and fourth graders in reading. And I did this almost for 10 years before I got a job with Running Rebels.
Okay. So let's talk about what is mentoring. Is mentoring and role modeling considered to be the same thing, or is there a difference? And if so, can we shed some light on that?
It's just that mentoring is role modeling. It's taking an individual and you're showing them the way they should do things in a positive manner. Rather it's playing a sport, rather it's teaching them how to read. It's role modeling. You give good examples and you expect them to follow those examples or guide them into making those right choices and the right decisions. So kind of the same thing.
Now, okay, in terms of the types of mentoring that you all offer, what does that look like?
We have 3 different types of mentoring. We
Okay.
have regular mentoring, which is more so of the we have referrals for regular mentoring where they come in and it's a lot of recreational activities, meeting them, at the schools or meeting them at Running Rebels to do some recreational type of things, going on outings, Bucks games, things of that sort. And then we have crisis stabilization, crisis mentors, which is a little bit higher level, which we work with a little bit more at-risk youth. Excuse me. And then we have a credentialed mentor, and that's a bachelor's level mentor, and those work with the extreme populations, the very high risk youth who may have some issues from mental health issues to backgrounds of gang violence and disorderly conducts and things of that sort. So we have 3 levels of mentoring.
Have 3 levels. In terms of maybe some other, so the format that people can receive mentoring in, is it one-on-one? Is it more small group setting? Is it?
Everything is one-on-one.
Everything is one-on-one.
Mentoring is one-on-one.
Mentoring is one-on-one. Okay, so let's talk about, when we talk mentoring is one-on-one, you talk about various population of youth that you work with, a very diverse group of youth. How do you prepare yourself as a mentor to do the work? So what does that preparation or that process look like?
I think it's based on the individual mentor. You can, if you're able to do this work, it's just something that you can't learn. You can't say we're going to take these classes and you're going to be an excellent mentor. It's just something that you have to have a desire to do. Like Marshall said, he just wanted to help. That's the first thing. You just got to want to help. You got to want to be able to reach out and give something back.
So is there any kind of formal training that is offered? And I don't even know if there's a national association that certifies mentoring or youth mentoring programs,
Our mentors do go through training.
They go through training.
We go through training when they first start. They go through an intensive training. They have to
Okay.
do so many hours of training before they are actually given a case.
Okay.
And then after that, we actually have monthly consultation meetings where they meet with a licensed therapist and go over their caseloads and get some support themselves. And that's also considered continuing training,
Okay.
as well as some other things like trauma-informed care.
Trauma-informed, okay.
We have the JCIP, which is Juvenile Cognitive Intervention Program. There's a number of other things as well, but yeah, we have continual education as training for our mentors.
Yeah. And I would just add that we also do restorative justice. We have the aggression replacement therapy training that we have our mentors take part in. And we are continuously looking to get the latest training that has been proven to be effective with the youth we serve.
So you said that you do the restorative justice program. Are you in a position to talk a little bit about what that component is and at all, or how long have you had that program? And
Well, it's not necessarily a program. It's something that we've offered and worked with our young people. We've taken part in various community trainings, and on an individual basis or in a small group setting, we found that works as well.
Okay.
Excuse me, not individual basis, but small group setting.
do we know what the principle of the guiding principle around restorative justice?
That would be to take the offender and having them meet up with the person that they offended and kind of come to empathy. Yeah, trying to understand that they're they understand the mistake that they're made and just try to come to understanding with their victims and try to get some forgiveness throughout the process.
I think one of the other bigger pieces is one of the additional big piece to that is also having a member from the community to talk about how it has affected them as well.
As a victim?
No, you have the victim, you have the offender, and possibly a community member.
Okay.
So that if your house was broken into and we have a relationship, you're my neighbor, my life now has changed to a point to where it's a ripple effect.
Gotcha.
So we want to kind of bring that and, again, have the empathy not only for the offender, but the offender for the victim and those that he affected indirectly as well.
We're talking about the mentoring connection, the importance of role modeling for youth. And we have as a special guest Running Rebels, Dante Holmes. We have Mr. Michael Peoples, Marshall Williams, and we have Nicholas Truall. And so we'll be back after this commercial. And if you would like to call in, you can join this conversation by dialing 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250.
Then I look at you, and the world's all right with me.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed, and we're talking about the mentoring connection, the importance of role modeling for youth. We have special guests in the studio from Running Rebels community organization. We have a young mentee in the studio with us, Nicholas Truall, and I just got corrected on how to pronounce his name, but he's good people. He's good people. So if you'd like to join this conversation, you can call 414-444-5250. Again, we're talking about the mentoring connection, the importance of role modeling for children and youth in our community. So you all work with a diverse population of children, both boys and girls. You have a variety of services or programs that you offer: multimedia, videography, the business entrepreneur program, tutoring. And so a lot of your children come from different communities, socioeconomic backgrounds. But I also know from experience that you all work with the foster care population. And so are you still doing that work with foster care?
Yes.
You're still doing work with foster care. And Mr. Williams, maybe you all can just, whoever wants to chime in on this, is when you're approaching different populations, what consideration do you have to make in order to work with those different populations? Do you work with your boys and your girls the same way? Or do they present with special needs? Children in foster care come with extensive trauma that they've been exposed to in their lives. And so how do you all approach those relationships or those populations?
Well, it's our goal to meet each youth at their level, where they're at, and try to gear our services towards that. It's important that we individualize each youth. They, like you said, they come from a diverse background, different communities. So we try our best to match the mentee with a mentor that's can that we feel would be a great interaction with them, create great interactions with them. That way, we're minimizing some of the issues that they're dealing with as it is, and trying to take that out of the picture. So that way they can focus on other things that is important besides dealing with the things that they deal with every day. So that mentor is kind of the person that's going to take them away from that reality, I guess you want to say, and try to introduce them or show them different things that they may not have been introduced or seen before. So we definitely meet the youth at their level.
What is the overarching goal of mentoring? What is the overarching goal? Why is mentoring so important?
Dr. Marshall, you want to answer that one? Since you have all the experience.
I'm gonna chime in on that a little bit. I'm gonna defer to a mentee to say what the overarching, I guess, effectiveness or goal is for mentoring. But it's to take the young man or the young lady and to give them some self-esteem, some hope, some worth that they matter. Excuse me, and that being sensitive to, especially in the foster care arena, being sensitive to the fact that there are issues with reactive attachment disorder, separation anxiety, and trust.
Okay, so when you talk about the foster care population and some of the needs that they present with, and one you talked about the reactive attachment disorder, which basically talks about the challenge or the problems that are presented with a child being able to establish healthy attachment to another individual. Okay, so they present with some attachment because there's probably some trust issues there. So that's going to lead into my next question then is, do you find that it's hard for these children or easy for these children and youth to trust, especially if they have reactive attachment disorder or if there's some other issues going on? And how do you get children to trust who have been violated in so many different ways? You know, abandonment issues, fathers are not there, mom sometimes not there, they're in the system, there's an element of loss. How do you get those children to trust you?
I think a lot of it has to do with consistency and respect for where they're coming from. There may be, like you say, issues with being abused or something like that. Keeping that personal space and respecting that personal space between you and your mentee is very crucial to establishing a new and trusting relationship. So that's the biggest thing.
What percentage of your youth come from a fatherless background or have a father absence, fatherlessness? How many of the children on your caseloads or served by your organization would you just, if you had to give a guess, approximately how many of them are coming from a single parent home?
If I just put a guess on that, I'd definitely say the majority of them.
Okay.
And if it was a percentage, at least 70%, 60%.
About 70. Yeah. That's pretty high. Yeah. So let me ask you this, Mr. Marshall. How many mentees have you had over the years? Approximately. Just a guess.
Approximately over the years. Are you talking about formally and informally?
Well, let's.
Or do you want to keep it?
Just in general, how many youth have you had a mentoring relationship with? Approximately. If you had to guess.
300.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's why he's Dr. Marshall. He's earned a doctorate in mentoring.
We have to give kudos. We need to somehow duplicate Mr. Marshall Williams for approximately serving 300 youth in our community. Now, let me ask you this. So about 65 to 70% of your youth probably come from single-parent homes. So do you find yourself taking on the role of a father to the young boys that you work with, or
Well, that's delicate, because you don't want to duplicate something that you can't duplicate, obviously. But at the same time, you want to build that relationship and that trusting relationship with the that they may not have never had, but and for them, they may look like the father, or duplication of the absentee dad. But those that it kind of goes back to your boundaries as well, because you have to kind of keep it separate because it's a professional relationship at the end of,
So what are some of the best practice boundaries?
Well, it's just a reminding of them, you're doing things that that is going to enhance their life, that's going to improve their life. But at the same token, at the end of the day, we're returning you home. We're taking you back to your home or wherever it is you're living, and we'll see you the next time. So it's still that detachment because eventually we want to have to detach them. So the goal of the mentor really is to establish relationships within their community that they can hold on to after you're out of there.
Wait. So that's an interesting piece because I was going to get to that at some point.
Okay.
So at some point you have to discharge. If you want to use the term discharge. What happens post-discharge? Even if they go back home to a single-parent home, female, what happens?
Honestly, well, for the good mentors, as me and as Marshall here is, a lot of times you keep those relationships. It may be disenrolled, but you can't disenroll a relationship. You can't stop an individual who's built a relationship with you to say, hey, if you're having an issue, you can't call me or you can't look to me anymore. Right. So those relationships continue. I've mentored youth that are in their 20, 25, and they still call me to this day. They still call me.
I like that piece you said you can't disenroll youth.
No.
And I think that's really important for children who have experienced issues around attachment and abandonment, especially. And what's the average length of time that you all will stay on a case? I guess that's a big piece as well.
About a year. So 12 months of, is that through your crisis services or is that through your regular mentoring? Does the length vary from program to program or? It depends on the referral source.
Depending on the referral source. Okay. And your referral sources are who?
90% of the mentor referrals come through Wraparound Milwaukee.
Now, Wraparound Milwaukee, for the record, this is Mr. Reed talking, they serve a high needs population, children who have some extreme emotional, what they call extreme needs, behavioral, emotional needs. So in working with that population, do you find that there is a different technique or strategy or approach, whether it's through your training, learning about mental health disorders, learning about relationship building? Is there a unique set of training that is offered that you would advise that anyone who wants to mentor with high needs or high risk youth that they would employ those services? Or
I would definitely say there is some training, trauma informed care, something like that, some cognitive intervention trainings, things of that sort. But honestly, there's no training to building relationships. It all depends. To me, it's all character. It's all about caring and all about wanting to be there for that youth. You may have youth that have those needs, and you deal with them accordingly, and you do take the trainings for them. But a lot of times, even with dealing with the individual youth that have those obstacles, just somebody being there for them is enough. It goes well beyond the need of that special need area. So again, the disbandment, that in itself is a lot of the issue. But if they have consistency, they have someone that's going to be there, that's going to take the time and work with them, you kind of don't see those issues a lot of the times. I've had, I'm sure Marshall can contest to this, that we've had cases where we've read the referral, we've read the some of the things that was going on in his youth life, and you never see them. They're normal kids, You get a call from the school, it's like they're doing X, Y, and Z, and you go to the school like, I've never seen his behavior before. He doesn't act like that with me. And that's because of the trust. That's because of the relationship that you built with them. And that's because of the consistency that you developed. They don't want to upset you. They don't want to disappoint you. So they're doing the best they can to keep that relationship as positive as possible.
So, with these youth who come to your program, children who come through wraparound is a funding source or a referral source. Who else?
We also get them through the core systems.
Through the core system, so wraparound in the core system. Okay, when you receive a referral, are there times or chances where you get a referral or you refer to a child and the child is not ready? Are all children ready for a mentoring relationship? And if they aren't, how do you know? Or what needs to be present in order for you to say, you know what, they're ready? You know, that matching process. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, a lot of the times that happens prior to us getting the referrals. And not to give it credit all to the mentors, we work with a team of individuals who are working with this individual youth. And they come up with what's called a plan of care for that youth. And
are you all participating in the plan of care?
Yes.
At the table, okay.
Yes.
And what is the plan of care? So for the audience who's not familiar with that term,
a plan of care basically is just a document that lists
guides the
services.
Okay.
Yeah, the needs, the goals, and objectives, and things of that sort.
Exactly. So, and I'm glad you brought that up, Dante, because in intervention services, and I'm thinking that you would classify mentoring as an intervention. You typically have intervention services like mental health.
Support services as well.
Support services, you know, that provide some intervention. Mental health is one. You have AOTA services. You have special education as an intervention. Treatment foster care is a formal. Foster care is an intervention support services. In these different areas, typically there is some document we call a treatment plan that will guide the care. And like you said, your problem, your goals, your strategies, all those things are outlined in that document. Is that true? Is that the same with mentoring?
Yes.
When you meet little Johnny, there's an assessment done, and it's determined that these are what Johnny's needs are, and then who is going to meet those needs. But particularly in the area of mentoring, do you sit back and define, say, okay, we have little Johnny here, and I'm going to start building this relationship with him. And so I need to focus on A, B, C, D, whether it's anger management, because hopefully in mentoring, there's also a character building component.
Definitely.
Okay. Now, what would you say for those people out there in the world who say, well, you know what, mentoring, what some people call mentoring is actually not mentoring, is recreational, because the child acts up at home, the parent calls the mentor picks him up, and then takes him to the movie, and then buys some soda and some pizza while they're at the movie, and then bring him back home. Or they take him over to the YMCA or the Boys and Girls Club and they shoot some ball, and then they bring him back home. What would be your response to that audience?
I would say particularly, first and foremost, it's kind of sad that that's looked at it in those in that light, because I think that downplays all the professionalism and extra support that a lot of mentors really put into that. But at the beginning, I think that's why it's so important to have parent involvement and open lines of communication, so you avoid that kind of misconception.
So parent involvement is another good piece.
Absolutely.
And helping mentoring relationship work. Consistency was another one. So for those people who are listening, we're talking about the mentoring connection and the importance of role modeling for youth in our community. Now, when you approach these relationships with these children and these youth, is mentoring females? I don't know if you all can even speak to that, because I don't know. Is best practice that you pair?
It's gender bias.
It's gender based.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the best practice. So,
yes.
Now, are there some other things that mentors shouldn't do when working with the youth? Are there any other boundaries that need to be established?
There's quite a few.
Okay, well, name a few.
Let me add one that worked out for me well in the beginning. Just kind of professionally putting it out there that we are mandated reporters.
Okay, and what does that mean?
I mean, that means that if a young person shares something with you about their life that may need child protective services to be involved, there's a thin line between your relationship and trust and what you're mandated to do as a professional. And I think that that's something that we can clearly discuss in our conversations, and they can.
And you're having that discussion with whom? With the youth, the
mentee. That's where I primarily have started mine with, is that, I want to be open with us, But my job is my job, and then at the end of the day, that's a professional judgment that you can share with a lot of the experts back at the building if you have questions or concerns. But that's a boundary that you definitely want to establish so that they're aware of that as well. One of the other ones is for myself, again, letting them know that we're not there to give you particularly advice on what to do. If a young person says, I got somebody pregnant, it's not my job to tell you A, B, or C. What the reality is you can point out these are options and let them discover it and research it and open them up to communicating with others that they trust as well. I think those are two big ones that stick out for me.
Should mentors take children home?
No.
No. And that's a huge liability.
Yep.
So, for those, so if there's a young kid that's listening to this program and their mentor is taking them home, then they should talk to an adult, to their parent.
Definitely.
Because that definitely should not be happening. Okay.
And you're saying home as into the mentor's
to the
house.
mentor. Yeah,
correct.
Let me clarify. Yeah, hopefully you're going to take the kid back home. But yes, sir, Mr. People. So we want to make sure we mentors are not taking children to their home. So now let me ask you this, because something I was reading was saying that. Well, let me ask you, is there any empirical data, some evidence-based data that shows that mentoring severely emotionally disturbed children, that it actually works? And does it work in a significant way? Because what I was reading was saying something opposite, but I would like to hear from those who are in the trenches working with the youth. Then also to hear from Mr. Chuak about whether or not mentoring actually works.
I would say that it works. It depends on the mindset of the child, like you were talking about earlier. What are some of the boundaries? And I think one of the most significant boundaries is that you cannot force a relationship. I was when I was in wraparound and in the system, I didn't contact Marshall for 2 to 4 months because I felt that I was forced into something that I want to go in.
Okay.
And it's not a recreational base when it comes to mentoring. It's building up a self-esteem, like Marshall said, and also giving them hope. Because when you go into a relationship like this, what I felt was that this is just another reminder of the situation I'm in and how much it's affected my life. But when you go through especially Running Rebels, you go through this program, it takes your mind off these things and gives you hope for the future and makes you think about what you want to do with your life.
Well, so how did it help you? How did mentoring help you?
It gave me something else to look at in life.
Okay.
I was more concerned about me, myself, and I.
Okay.
Go to school, go home, play video games, hope this nightmare ends, per se. But when it came to Running Rebels, it was more of getting involved in the community. Excited to go to a simple walk and run and just with the Running Rebels staff, just to go to some event that helps the community, do some community service, even if it's just eventually when I was out of the system, just tutoring kids or just helping out with football, just being a role model to them. It makes you want something more out of life and makes you think that there's stuff beyond your situation, things how you can get back after you're done with the mentoring program.
Okay. So do you think that having a mentor changed your life, the trajectory of your life, the path that you're going to use?
Oh, yeah. I had no idea when I came into, I did not know what life was. I didn't know what I wanted to do after graduation. It was, you don't understand sometimes. And I love my parents to death, but my parents didn't really provide me with an opportunity or an idea of what I wanted to do. It would just say, yeah, go to college, yeah, go for a career. But everyone has like a different feel for things and a different passion that they want to go into that you can't really pinpoint something. And what Marshall did for me was not to indirectly really. It was really just I would talk to him about things that I like to talk about, and then like he steered me towards a path that I really like to do. And I really like to look at situations that happen in the community and the world and how to make it better, which leads me down the career path I'm doing today.
I'm really glad, Nicholas, that you're here. You all need to hire him to do some PR work, some commercials for you all, because you just sold their program. That's really great. Let me ask you this, because I was reading the paper on Sunday, December the 14th, and there were two cases that were referenced, I believe, on the front page But one of them was dealing with the young man who was 19 years old, had been in foster care, and he was sentenced to 44 years in the shooting death of a young girl by the name of Sierra Guyton. And then there was another story in the same paper. I thought it was on the front. No, it was on another page. And this young man, Ashanti Hendricks, and my understanding, he had been locked out and he'd received 10 years in prison for a crime that he's committed. And again, he's come from the foster care community. And my question is, because I know children in care present with some very significant needs. Do you ever get those cases where you pick up the paper, or a situation where you pick up the paper and there's somebody that you've mentored and you're like, wow, what happened, or what I could have done differently, and maybe they're not in the paper, but you know, on the community wire, you hear something. How do you deal with that?
It's difficult, especially when you think about the work that you put into the youth, and but at the end of the day, we can change your situation for the time. But eventually, if your life doesn't change, or like Nick said, if you don't want to change your direction of the way you want to live your life, you're eventually going to go back to those same bad habits that you had prior to. So, the old cliches, you can't save everyone, but we definitely, do feel bad when we work with youth for any amount of time and see them continue down a road like that. So
there are a lot of youth in our community who are not afforded the opportunity to have a mentor. Now, if you're part of wraparound, there's a high probability that you will have a mentor assign your case. If you get into trouble and through the court system, now there's an opportunity presented for you to receive mentoring services. Is it sometime too late? Do we need to work on getting mentoring services in some capacity to youth at an earlier age, given the high level of fatherlessness that is present in our community? What do you say to that?
Well, that's really in depth, and especially when you're talking about at a younger age introducing mentoring, it's like indirectly introducing a second type of public figure, or just like a family member.
Okay.
I think that trying to introduce mentoring at a younger age is a significant process and great idea, but some people, it's building mentoring and becoming a role model is something that is not, you can't just initiate. It's something that you got to be like a good influence for one. You got to push someone in the right direction.
But is one of the responsibilities or goal of mentoring is to provide some guidance?
Yeah, and also part of that is too, is a lot of times it's easier to build relationship with younger youth than it is when they're in their teenage years.
Why?
Because they're more susceptible to what you're offering. Impressionable, and they're if you're offering something positive, they're 9 times out of 10 they're more susceptible to it, accepting of it.
So you would agree that it would be beneficial if somehow, some way that we can get mentoring services to and what do you think might be the gateway or the door for that? Because I don't know, someone will say, okay, well, it begins with parenting, mentoring, but as parents and mentors the same thing, certainly parents should model some appropriate behavior, but would you say that parents are mentors? And if people aren't a part of the foster care community or through the court system, where should they look to get mentors? How?
Well,
where can we go?
I think that the parents, being a parent and being a mentor is separate, because parents have to be able to have some authority over their child. Mm-hmm. So the relationship between a parent and its child is significantly different than that mentor. We're there to offer guidance and support, and that's our main goals. To answer your question, also, it starts in schools as well. Earlier you asked about just mentoring, or stated that mentoring is just recreational and things of that sort. I know for our mentors, especially our crisis workers, we're in schools, we're in the community.
Okay.
We're dealing with youth everywhere. It's not just recreation. We'll sit all day in the school if the youth is having a problem. just to make sure that they're not getting suspended.
So how do we get services to youth who aren't involved in the system? Because it's unfortunate that children have to be in trouble or in state of crisis, displacement, all these other pieces before they can get. Would it be beneficial that funding comes from
That is
the bank of heaven somewhere? And say, okay, let's fund a program like Running Rebels for prevention services so we can make sure that every child in the community is attached to a loving, supportive role model.
There are very few programs out there of that sort,
Right.
but that is like the age-old argument. Since I've been doing this, I've always said that we need to look at preventative services prior to the youth getting into these systems and things of that sort. There are a few voluntary services out there.
Okay, like what? Boys and girls?
No, there's the wraparound. They have the REACH program.
The REACH program, okay.
And also FIS, which is Family Intervention Support Services, and those are voluntary services, but they can get the same services that regular RAP youth
Okay,
get.
so that's the REACH program,
Yes.
a wraparound, and the FIS,
FIS.
FISS, and wraparound's phone number is 257-7611. I think you have to press 0, and if you want to inquire about the REACH program and the FIS program to see what services are available and for just the general community or Milwaukee County residents.
Also, as well, at Running Rebels, we have a program called a Violence Free Zone.
Violence-free?
VFZ, and we're located in how many schools am I? Six schools throughout the city of Milwaukee, and 2 middle schools, and they are in-house mentoring services actually in the schools.
Okay, let me ask you this question. This is, to me, is a really good interview and some really good information. Consider the number of children that you all have worked with and that you're working with currently. What percentage of those children you think are angry, that present with a lot of anger?
With everyone who comes into just getting in contact with a mentor through wraparound and
Yeah, I was thinking from the mentor standpoint, program manager, the youth that you're working with. Do they present? Do they appear under the radar? They've been screened. They've had a battery background checks. Do you all? I'm assuming that you all provide background checks. This is for consolation for some parent that's listening. So all of your mentors go through a battery of background checks. Correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what needs to happen in terms of maintaining that trust, or what precautions should children and parents take when being involved in a mentoring relation? Because not every person's motive is pure. So what are some precautions that you think?
First of all, you need to make sure that the agency that the mentor is coming from is reputable, as well as the family involvement is very important to make sure that the matches meet. Making sure that your youth is feeling comfortable with that mentor, questioning him, asking them questions when they come back, and just making sure that the comfort level is there with that mentor. I think that's a start.
Okay.
And just to piggyback on what Dante said, we have random, surveys. If I can't think of a better word, but surveys, either for the child or for the caregivers, asking them what did so and so do when you went on an outing or something like that, and encourage the parents, to ask their children, what did you do while you were out so many hours with so and so, and where did you go and stuff like that.
Yes, we do. We Q&A our mentors at least quarterly, and it's random. And then we also we've been in the business long enough. We can catch red flags. If initially they get through, we have like I said, we do monthly consultations with professional therapists, and we ask those questions, and so we very much the hands-on and the trainings and that sort. We hopefully will catch those things.
Are you all in need of mentors?
Always
need a mentor. Okay, that's great. So if someone is interested in becoming a mentor with Running Rebels or some other community program, they can call Running Rebels at 414-264-8222. That's 414-264-8222. Just want to say thank you, gentlemen, for coming on Fresh Start today and talking about this very important service that you all provide to the community. We wish you all well. Enjoy your holidays, and hopefully you all can come back again.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today. This is part two. We are going to be talking about managing conflict or conflict resolution skills for high needs children, teaching children with high needs conflict resolution skills. And we have a special guest in the studio by the name of Miss Bria Grant from Discerning Truth Consulting.
Yes, I'm a consultant. I've conducted groups through my business for a number of years, more than a little over 5 years now. I'm also an operations director with an organization, Milwaukee Area Health Education Center, otherwise known as Milwaukee AHAC, and we do work to reduce health disparities within the Milwaukee area. And we know that health disparities consist of where we work, play, worship, learn.
So you've been in business for about 5 years. Who are some of your clients that you've worked with, you said?
Well, I've done some work with NPS.
With NPS? Okay.
One of the programs that we had there was a workforce development program with young people. My goal was to re-engage high school dropouts back into their high school career and connect them with a paid work experience. One of the things that we did there that made this program very unique is we provided that component to include the conflict resolution, trying to teach our young people, how you deal with your teachers, how you deal with your peers, how you deal with those individuals in the community, how do you de-escalate yourself, how do you recognize things before they explode, because this is often, some of the things that lead them to go astray from a healthy path.
Okay, so let me ask you, because you're teaching conflict resolution skills in your curriculum.
That's part of it.
Part of your curriculum is conflict resolution. Is there a difference between conflict resolution and anger management?
Absolutely. So anger is an emotion. It's a feeling. You don't necessarily have to have another person or entity. I'll give an example. I had an anger management issue when I was younger.
No.
I know, right? Hard to believe. Little sweet old me. But yeah, so I played tennis, and I would get angry and throw my tennis racket down. I done broke a couple of them. My coach, he'd tell me to run laps, and it just didn't settle with me. So that's different than having a conflict. A conflict is sometimes situational, it's relational, where you're dealing with weighing options. What's the best route? What are the greater values? What's the best solution?
Okay. So there's a difference between conflict resolution and anger management. You said anger is an issue, but is how you handle anger or you control that anger, that's different than conflict resolution.
I hope I heard you right.
Yeah.
But having anger issues can result to conflicts.
Okay.
And so if I have an anger management issue as a young person, and I'm coming to the classroom and I'm ultra aggressive with my teacher because I'm late, and there are consequences as a result of me being late. And now the conflict is that I am approaching a situation in an aggressive manner, and there are consequences behind that. I need to deal with how I'm approaching the situation to incorporate conflict resolution.
Okay. So in our discussion today, we're focusing on teaching conflict resolution and negotiation skills. Because there's a negotiation piece, I'm assuming, that's a part of conflict resolution. So teaching those skills to youth and probably to adults. Do you ever work with children and youth, or parent and child, around conflict resolution?
Absolutely. I also do prenatal care and care coordination with women, and so it involves the whole family. And this is just a sidebar. One of the things that's really, really important is that our young people, they are not just an island.
Okay.
They come with guardians, siblings, a whole gamut of different people that are in their lives that have authority over them, that give them insight that they look up to. And when we are dealing with our young people and giving them these very, very vital skills in life to be successful, such as conflict resolution and anger management, it's really important to incorporate those key people. Because sometimes, and this is what I found in my experience, sometimes it's not necessarily them. The root cause is not that they are just a rebellious child, or they just have behavior issues, but it's the example of that authoritative figure in their life. And it may be their mom, it may be their dad, it may be a guardian, or someone who has a significant role in their life that is not demonstrating the behavior to help them understand how they need to deal with various conflicts in their lives. So I definitely deal with youth. At times, I do deal with the adults. I was also an AOTA mental health counselor, where this was, something else that individuals who are having issues with managing their life appropriately needs to also have strong conflict resolution skills.
So conflict is inevitable, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. So I guess anytime you find there are two or more people in any situation, there is the potential for conflict to arise. Is conflict necessarily a negative thing, or are there some benefits?
I believe there are some benefits to conflict. As I evaluate my own life, and I try to be honest, and I try to encourage my young people that, the best growth comes when you're honest with yourself. And sometimes when we have those moments of conflict, it brings some clarity to who we are and our own character development and our own need to grow to a higher level when you're challenged by something that doesn't agree with your set of values. And if you have a set of values that have not been instilled in a very healthy manner, any form of disciplinary is going to be a conflict for you, because it's like, you don't tell me what to do. My own mama don't tell me what to do. Well, that's a problem.
Well, how can a person recognize when their conflict now or the presence of conflict is an unhealthy thing? Because if there's some positive pieces to conflict, and talking about youth, you can't avoid conflict. Mm-hmm. Conflict is going to be everywhere, and a lot of times it will appear. Is conflict, since it has some good qualities to it, when should people be concerned about conflict? When is conflict out of control?
Well, you definitely want to be concerned with conflict when it escalates to violence, or begins to seem as if it's going to escalate to a
name calling, and these are some ways that people
absolutely
respond to.
Name calling, bullying is a very more prominent thing that's going on in our schools. Of course, violence is conflict being manifested in a negative way.
So when things seem to be getting out of control, we will recognize that maybe we're calling people names, that we are being physically aggressive. There's some bullying tendencies possibly in youth. But for adults, how important is it for parents to teach conflict resolution skills to their kids, and what would be the first step?
I think the first step is exemplifying the behavior.
So modeling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. One of the things that's really, really important for us to understand that our community is dealing with, specifically with our young people, is the presence of trauma in the lives of our young people. So when you have that as a base of your existence, conflict it becomes normal. It has to be like this. It's not love if we're not arguing. If it's not an issue, then we're not growing. We
create it.
We do.
Because we find some sense of comfort. Okay. Because we come from such chaotic, conflicting,
in some instances,
conflict-induced environments, some of us. Mm-hmm. And so put them in the White House and we go cause some conflict. We go tear up some stuff over at the White House. Okay, I got it. Okay. So now let me ask you, because some people, sometimes when there's the presence of conflict, they will have a tendency to withdraw from a situation, because you have people who avoid conflict. Is that an unhealthy thing? And some children even do that.
Well, there are different styles of dealing with conflict, and you do have that avoidance. You have the accommodating, you have the compromising, you have the collaborating, and I think.
Can you talk a little bit about which each one of those are? So these are different types of conflict resolution styles, and so when you talk about accommodating, who's that person?
So that's typically you kind of neglect your own self, and you kind of give in, so to say, to that of the other party to kind of satisfy their needs. And then when you're avoiding, you just kind of ignore it, which is a lot of what our young people do. They think that it's just going to go away. Like, I don't have to deal with it. I don't have to talk about it. I'll leave and come back, it's still there, but they think that, you should be over it now. That situation is done. we not on that anymore, quote unquote, is how they how they refer to it. And then, of course, compromising is where both of the parties can find a happy medium.
Okay.
And then collaborating is really truly understanding, the various perspectives. I think that's really important because that incorporates another skill that we also want to get our young people to heighten, and that is listening and really, stepping outside of yourself to see, how does this other person feel? How do they see it? What am I missing?
Okay.
And that is a very selfless approach.
Okay.
Which is something that our young people and adults, I guess I can't even just minimize to our young people, but humans, to be selfless is very, very difficult. It's usually associated with a sign of weakness, but it's actually, in my opinion, it's actually more strength. It takes a very strong person to pause and say, I'm going to step out of my shoes for a moment and take a balcony view of this situation and see what am I missing so that I can have clarity as I present my case. Because that's how you negotiate, right?
Okay.
You want to have the information, you want to be factual. And, one of the things I identified is that, and I'm sure we'll probably get to this, with our various communities, there are different styles.
Yes.
So you have that factual style for our European brothers and sisters. They may be a little kind of smooth, laid back, low key, but very factual. And, this is my point and this is, what I'm saying. Where African Americans, we're very emotional. I talk with my hands all the time and I get,
very expressive.
Very expressive. Yeah. We have a lot of passion.
And can some people interpret that as being...
I was just getting ready to go there. Some people interpret that as aggression,
okay.
And anger, and you're an angry black woman. It's like, no, I'm not. I just am passionate about what I speak on, and so that's kind of, I don't know if it's in my DNA as a woman, as a black woman. A lot of black women speak like that, but those are some of the things. And then you have our Latino community where they have a more relational sense. How is this going to affect the other person stance when it comes to conflict resolution and how they approach it? And of course, this is not for everybody in those ethnic groups, but overall,
would you say that that children then will learn some of those conflict resolution styles of their parents, regards to what community that they come from, but that our children, and I think that's really important, especially when we deal with mixed race placements in foster care or in adoption, really understanding the culture and the community from which that child comes from, because communication is really key. I think in conflict resolution, in building relationships, communication is key. So understanding how we communicate or how others communicate will be significant in helping kids work through conflict or deal with conflict and also build healthy relationships.
Absolutely. And, I was a foster parent for a number of years. And one of the things that while it's great, we have a lot of children in the foster care system, and anytime they can get a healthy, positive home, you definitely want them to, have access to that. But one of the things that really did not settle well with me in that process, and I know that, there are a lack of resources or homes that are available to accommodate this, is that when we have our African American children who are in foster care, and then they transfer them to a outer lying county, away from their community, away from people that know what they're about, and then they provide, and this is great thing that these institutions, agencies provide, but then they provide them training to be culturally sensitive to the child that they have in their home, and some things you can learn and some things you can't. Some things are kind of built in you because you've grown in it. The way you may eat is something that, we like chicken. I grew up, we ate chicken every day, boiled, fried, baked. However, my auntie decided to cook it on that day, we had chicken. And, now I'm coming in a house where we're eating zucchini and, other things that I'm not used to. And that's a very just, minute example. But understanding that, there's a sense of culture that comes with our young people.
Okay.
And not to say, again, I think it's great if you can find a healthy home for a child that's in foster care. But one of the things that I advocated for and continue to advocate for in our community is that, we start to take in our children.
Oh, I believe there's definitely some positives and strengths to that. But if for some reason we can't take in our children, and I believe that children need loving, nurturing, caring environments, but I also think they need culturally responsive environments. And so if an African American person takes in a Latino child, that they really need to understand the culture and the community from which that Latino child comes from and incorporate some of that into their parenting. Because I think sometimes when we don't celebrate and embrace and honor who people are, that can cause conflict.
Right. Right.
Okay. So, so when we start talking about some of the cause of conflict, so when we fail to acknowledge or to honor culture, who people are, but also to sometimes maybe in the lack of clarifying roles, when there's confusion about who's the parent and who's not the parent or who's the leader. But are there any other things that can cause conflict in a child's life?
Well, absolutely. Of course, you have the values in which you stated, as far as the culturally responsive.
Okay.
And that can have a heavy significant and conflict in the home. Styles, the way that people communicate. Which in turn
or lack of communication
or
too.
lack of communication, right? Can also in some ways be related to the culture of a home, but scarcity, and that's something I don't think we think of. If we're limited for resources, it's competition. And so that's also a conflict.
Okay.
Now I got to fend for myself in some instances, and I had to do it by any means necessary. I might, and so
some people teach. Now, I'm so glad we're on the culture piece because when I was a kid, not long ago, I can remember growing up in a family environment where the value that was taught in terms of dealing with conflict, you didn't bother anybody. But if somebody hit you, you better bust their head to the white. That was the value that we were taught. So was that a good thing or a bad thing? Because in parenting, they come from different places and experiences. So
absolutely. And it's funny you say that because my daughter just kind of reminded me of something similar she said I said to her. But that's a home I grew up in. I grew up in, you don't run away from a fight. You need to stand up for yourself or the bully going to keep bullying you. Where there are other homes that say, you know what, just walk away. It'll go away. Tell someone. And those are good strategies as well. I can't be the judge to say which one is healthy or not.
Or is it ever appropriate to use aggression in resolving conflict? Or are we of the Martin Luther King persuasion, nonviolence,
Well,
you get hit in the eye, you just hit in the eye, your eye's going to go down, we're going to put some little ice on it. What should we be teaching children about conflict resolution?
I try to encourage my young people to avoid a physical altercation by any means necessary. Whatever is in your will to do to avoid a physical altercation or confrontation, exercise and exhaust all of those options. And if you're left with no options, it's not wise for you to just allow.
So we have to give them some alternatives, especially if you come from, particularly a foster setting. If this child comes from an environment like where I came from, and you were taught to fight when it was necessary to fight, and now you're in a whole different type of system, a whole different type of family setting that does not value physical altercation or even defending yourself. Then it's a challenge there, is what I'm saying. So how do you...
Well, I was going to even bring up another thing, where some of our, a lot of young people that I've come home or come encounter with, physical altercation is the first option. You say something I don't like, I'm going to bust you in your face. Okay. And then we're going to talk about this later. So it's kind of, it definitely has to be a balance. You have to identify, what that background is for that young person. And I think the easiest way to get to that, I don't know if it's just me, but my young people open up to me so freely.
Okay.
A lot of times they desire someone that can sit down and have a candid conversation, help them understand that, okay, anger is not always a bad thing. You may be upset and it's okay.
okay.
A lot of times we
It's
say,
emotion,
oh, no,
yeah.
what you mad for? It's like, some things, it is a reason to be upset
And
about.
I think particularly for children who are in care, or children who come from some extremely compromised environments, that there's a thing called justified anger. When your parents and your siblings have been removed from your life under whatever circumstances,
Right.
it was going to incite some natural emotions and confusion, anger, frustration. All those feelings are justified. But I think, and you can have some. It presents a certain element of conflict in your life, and you have to figure out how to deal with this bad situation. So when we start talking about some of the causes, we talked about communication, lack of clarification of roles. But another thing I think is also important to talk about is the value. Some people value conflict. Wherever they go, they create conflict. It's a value. They look for conflict. They start conflict. But another thing is sometimes change and the resistance to change. And young people and older people, life is about change. It's about evolution. And sometimes we can get comfortable and so we can get stuck, But then change presents itself
Right.
and it presents a certain element of conflict if we don't embrace it. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a break. And after this break, we will be asking some more questions and finding information about how to teach young people conflict resolution skills. You can call and join this conversation if you like at 414-444-5250. You are listening to Fresh Start Today. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed, and I have a special guest in the studio by the name of Bria Grant. She's from Discerning Truth Consulting Services, and Miss Grant is talking with us about what we can do to help young people manage conflict in their lives, help children manage conflict in their lives. So we kind of talked about some of the causes, and just for repeat, some of the causes can be lack of leadership or not being clear about roles in a relationship, in a household, in the family setting. We've also talked about that sometimes conflict is caused by
Personality conflict.
Scarcity.
Scarcity, lack of resources. Not having goals that are shared. And, of course, styles, just, various styles of communication.
Right. And resistance to change was another one. Lack of communication. Values, person who values conflict. Some of these can cause conflict. But to be specific, what can parents do to help children manage conflict in a healthy way? Conflict that needs to be managed. Conflict that is unhealthy, toxic. What can parents do in helping those children manage conflict in their lives?
I think, and I said this before, one of the most impactful things that you can do to kind of instill great skills into our young people or your children is just exemplify the behavior. A lot of times we want to remove our children from those moments that may show us in an unpreferable light.
Okay.
One of the things, I have an 11-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I like to talk to my children about, areas that I might not have known how to deal with. Because as I go through that, they see, okay, you know what, this happened to Mama. She was at work and she had an employee that, didn't necessarily agree with her. This is a hypothetical situation. And, this is how she dealt with it. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to incorporate that method at school with my teacher, or incorporate it with, one of my peers in classroom. Because that resonates more than me saying, you need to do it like this and you need to do it because I said so. That's a conflict, because now I'm exercising my power, which is another source of conflict.
When people abuse their authority or their power, exercise their power, okay. That can create
Oh,
conflict.
absolutely.
Yeah,
That can create a conflict. You know, if you're bigger than me and you're saying sit there because I said so, it automatically, you know, we have an issue here.
What about remaining calm? In terms of steps to manage, how important is remaining calm when dealing with conflict? Because I'm assuming that you can't resolve problems when you're angry, or you're going to have some challenges in resolving problems when you're angry. So how important is remaining calm?
So one of the things that I like to get my young people to understand is themselves. What triggers you? What happens?
Identify triggers. Okay.
What happens when someone says something that annoys you? How do you respond? And then can you recognize that before it happens?
So what would be the specific tool? Okay, so if identifying triggers, so do you tell them to take a time out? Do you tell them to count to 10? Or what are some strategies that a parent that's listening to this program can use for that child who's angry and has an enormous amount of conflict going on in their life? What can we do?
I don't think that there's one strategy. I think that the most important thing we need to do is give our children options.
Okay,
give them various options. You know, you can walk away. You can count. You can say, you know, can we talk about this at another time? Or you can express in a not aggressive manner, you know, how it's making you feel to the person that you're having the situation with. And those are all okay. You know, there's not one specific thing that our young people need to do to respond to conflict. The most important thing is being able to recognize it, being able to choose your battles.
Okay.
Is it worth the fight? Is it worth going there? Is that even your issue? Because being able to recognize that, okay, you know what, this isn't my place to address, but this may be my caregiver's place to address, or my teacher's place to address. And so that's something that we need to make sure that we just give our young people options.
Okay, so you give them options, and you had mentioned before that listening is a good strategy or tool, that people just need to listen. And probably in listening, because when we fail to listen, we have a tendency to make assumptions, or you know, we think that we know what the other person is thinking, you know, but the other thing is avoid accusation.
Absolutely. And just to say something about the listening, because you know, you can say you listening, you can look at me dead in my face as I talk, and you're really not listening. It's just because then you're in your head, you're formulating your response, you're having those accusations, you're making all these assumptions as to why the person is doing what they're doing and responding the way they're responding. And so you aren't actually engaged in listening to what's going on. And that's something that I try to, you know, encourage my young people to do. You know, don't think about a rebuttal right now. That's not what we on.
And you'll see that a lot. I mean, particularly, and again, foster children are wonderful, but our children in foster care are wonderful, but they often seem to be on the defense. You know, they can be 5 years old, but they're on the defense. They're 7 years old, they're on the defense.
Well, and think about it, though. You know, here it is at the core, because at the core of all of conflict resolution, there has to be some level of trust to say, you know, I'm not losing, so to say, or this is not going to be not in my best interest.
Right.
And when we're dealing with our foster children, at the core, the level of trust has been broken with that very person that they thought should have been there, regardless of the circumstance. It could have not been the parent's fault. It could have not been the child's fault. It could have been just an unusual circumstance. But there's a level of trust that is broken and that is missing. So I have to be on the defense.
But what listening also does, it allows that child or that individual to put themselves in the shoes of another party and see things from their perspective.
And it also gives them the opportunity to de-escalate themselves.
Okay.
Because if you get into a situation, conflict typically immediately arouses anger. In most instances, how that anger is manifested depends on the person's personality. But to be able, when you're listening, you kind of de-escalate yourself. You're calming yourself down. You're saying, okay, let me hear what they're saying. Let me just listen to what she really is saying. Maybe something is gonna make sense. Maybe, you know, and encourage your young people to be honest with themselves. If you're wrong, it's okay to say that you're wrong, and it's not going to be a ha. We have to demonstrate that to them by when we're wrong.
Okay.
Because
That's a modeling piece. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So for parents, two-parent home or a parent with a mate that lives in the home, and children are watching how they handle conflict. Domestic violence is a serious issue in the community, and a lot of the children who come into the systems care come from home where there is a presence of domestic violence. And what violence does, it teaches children how to handle conflict in that way, which can sometimes be very unhealthy. But let me ask you this question. Well, let me make this statement. I think that most parents from this community, that they handle conflict or teach you conflict in a number of ways. And one of those ways is when you have conflict with your children, you just send them to bed.
Do you? Or do they get a whooping?
Well, I'm going to get there. A lot of them, there's physical discipline, which by law is not a crime. It's the excessive force.
Correct.
But in the context of foster care, there is state code that prohibits that type of discipline of children. So my thing is that, parents may use by saying, okay, well, you need to go take a time out, or you need to go to bed, or you're going to get a whooping. That's what they do. So do you think that in teaching conflict management skills to children, that it's going to look different depending on the age of the child? A young child versus a teenager? And if so, how does that look?
Well, with our young people, our children, first of all, children are like sponges. I have a 4-year-old. It doesn't take me much to really show her something and how things should be, or a way that she should behave. And she goes on from there. Okay, mama, that's what you said. All right, I'm gonna do it just like that. Well, your teenagers, they are, rebellious in some instances. They go through, various stages in their life, physically, emotionally, socially, and you have to take all of those things into consideration. When dealing with conflict, you have to understand, what their peer group is like. Where they are psychologically, because you can have a 16-year-old that's not
functioning, yeah,
and that is, and as a foster parent, when I was a foster parent, that's something that I experienced and that I had to, kind of get a quick grip on, because I couldn't teach her, even though she was 16, I couldn't teach her like a 16-year-old. I had to teach her at a more 8th grade level, and that is not just in foster care.
Okay.
Children across our community are not necessarily functioning socially at the level that they should be functioning. And this is, again, I talked about trauma and the prevalence of trauma in our community. The research about trauma and how it impacts us is extensive. And when you learn about trauma-informed practices, you recognize that when our young people are traumatized, that certain levels of their brains begin to not develop at the same rates. Or at an appropriate rate. So those are some of the things that you need to take in consideration when you're identifying, how do I teach this young person trauma? Conflict resolution, where are they mentally, emotionally, socially? And it is not a teenager child thing by age, but where this child is developmentally, I think, is the most important thing. And so you can kind of feel what you can expose your children to, what they're able to handle, and what they can intake, 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 and what they. Because that's a difficult realization to come to when you have a 17-year-old who is not developmentally that of his age. That's a reality that a parent has to look up and say, okay, how do I address this? What do I do? What happened? And so that's a conflict at a parental level that we don't typically address.
Okay. Something I read not too long ago is that another way that some people, children and adults, can manage conflict two things. One, I think what my mother also did, she pulled rank. And I think,
Just
people
exercise our power.
she exercised her power. And so, and I think that, sometimes that is a way that some people respond in terms of dealing with conflict, but I don't know what relationships that children might be in where they pull rank, but sometimes there is, if you're in a school and you have a fifth grader versus a first grader, sometimes their presence is intimidating. They're much bigger, much larger, whatever. But my other thing too was compromise. Is that compromise is a strategy or tool that parents can use in teaching their children or young people can use when they're faced with conflict. Because again, I think compromise involves negotiation. It involves putting yourself in the position of someone else and giving others the benefit of the doubt. Is give a little, take a little. And I think that to some degree with the young people that are coming up now, I think there's some challenge around putting yourself in other people's shoes. There's some difficulty around that. Or compromising, because there is a me-I focus that's going on. So what is your take on the whole compromise piece?
Well, I stated before that it requires a lot of selfless behavior. And I wouldn't say compromise is, because that one, compromising is when you're pretty much kind of you're kind of coming to a happy consensus, but I would prefer the collaborating.
Okay.
Because now we are just saying,
and you're talking about collaborating. Okay, so what is that?
So the collaborating, we are like stepping outside of our shoes. We're trying to understand the other perspective. Compromises. Well, I want this and you want that, so we're gonna meet in the middle.
Okay.
No, we want to be able to, and this is how you learn. When you can say, I know why Jermaine moves the way I understand why Daddy told me I need to do the dishes
or
every
the
night.
teacher told me
Right.
that, yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
So now, going in the future, this may be a conflict that doesn't occur as often because I've had that ability to step outside of myself and understand the other perspective. And we know that, perspective is reality for a lot of people. It may not necessarily be what's real, but that's what I see.
Social scientists say that youth violence has revealed that violent adolescents often have deficits in social problem-solving skills. And they hold the belief that attitudes are supportive of aggression. Again, that's like going for what we were talking about earlier, that I came from a home environment where we were taught that, that you fought back. You didn't turn and walk away. Or in some other folks' home, they're taught that they like to fight. Everything around them is fighting. Violence, aggression, conflict. And that has an effect on you physiologically, mentally, medically, just all kind of different changes that your body goes through as a result of holding on to conflict and being in these intense situations constantly. So my question to you is, do you think that conflict is more so nurture or nature?
I think it's a little bit of both.
It's a little bit of both?
Okay. Because we are products of our environment. If I grow up in a home that's aggressive, now it's not always. You have those few that fall far from an apple tree, and they're just not that. They haven't picked up those, or they haven't adopted the characteristics of the environment that they come from. But I believe that there's a 50-50. There's not one nurture or nature that outweighs as far as aggression in our overall development. I do believe that that education helps us when we're weighing out how our personality is and being able to be exposed to different options. Again, I think that's the most important thing we can do for our young people. Let them know that they have options. It's okay to utilize different options. You don't have to go with just this because I said so. But here are some other ways, healthy, to deal with this. So I guess
okay. Well, what we're going to do, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back talking about how to help children manage conflict in a healthy way, helping young children and young people manage conflict in a healthy way. You're listening to Fresh Start Today. We'll be right back. All right. You're listening to Fresh Start Today. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed, and I have in the studio with me Bria Grant from Discerning Truth Consulting Services. And Ms. Grant, she teaches conflict resolution skills to young people and adults. And so we wanted to get her on the program to talk about what we as parents can do to teach young children and youth not anger management, well, I guess it's a little bit of anger management is in there as well, but conflict resolution skills. And so we've talked about the causes of it, how we can deal with it. I want to kind of give you a scenario and see if you can kind of help us walk through what a parent can do, and then we'll look at one with what a child can do. So let's just say in a situation, a birth parent and foster parent, they don't get along. The birth parent feels that the foster parent is getting more support from the child welfare system than they are. The foster parent feels that the birth mother directs the foster child to defy her rules. She also feels that the case manager is intimidated by the birth parent, who has threatened physical harm to all of them and to sue the local child welfare authorities. How would you work with this group to minimize conflict?
Well, I would definitely work with a team of care. Typically, which is good. The foster children in our bureau have a care team with your care coordinator, your case manager, your mom, and then that's the table. That's the place where you lay those things out and provide your concerns as to how this is going to impact the child, because ultimately that's the important piece of the pie. So I will say I've been in that situation before,
Right, yeah.
where my foster daughter, she was running away from home almost every other weekend. And I'm just like, wow, you guys aren't going to do anything? And they're like, well, and the mom is like, I'm going to call the police, or I'm going to call the people. And I'm like, whoa, this is not that. How do we? And that is what I had to do. I had to have a conversation with the mom to let her know that, I'm not here to replace you. And sometimes just to provide that clarity to a person and assurance that I want to support you. I don't want to, minimize who you are and your role and significance in her life. My goal is to, while we can work to get you to a place of reunification, to provide still a healthy home for your child. So I think being able to, again, understand and try to get people to understand. A lot of times we feel like I don't have to explain anything to you or to anybody for that matter, but to take a moment to explain to a person, to give them some clarity on your position can go a long way.
What do you think is helpful to always pull in this team that you talk about, in terms of trying to resolve conflict, say, between the two parents in this scenario, this case? Because sometimes I think that can complicate things, and other times I think it's really helpful. So do you think that you got to somehow assess that or weigh that out?
You do. And if it's an extreme case where, there's being, bodily harm and threats are being, put out there, you don't, as a foster parent, you don't want to put yourself in any position that might compromise, your safety. And to do a one-on-one may not be wise for you as a foster parent to approach that biological parent to try to get them to have some clarity, understanding.
Maybe that can happen in a phone conversation. Maybe there's other ways of communicating to try to, I'm just saying, to eliminate a third party. Sometimes, other times it's really, like you said, safety considerations are made, and you need to involve a third party. But I'm just wondering in terms of, And
you do have to weigh it out. And I will say, particularly in my situation, that I use a number of different vehicles to come to a happy place. At first, it was at the team level because there wasn't a relationship there. And so that team helped facilitate a relationship between me and the biological parent where I felt comfortable, even though, they cussed me out, I can at least pick up the phone and begin or attempt to have a dialogue with the biological parent. And then there were times, even in the midst of trying to develop a relationship outside of the team, I had to bring the team back in and say, I'm trying. But it's...
Because co-parenting is really important in these foster, birth, parent type relationships. And, it's really good when you all can be on the same page and people understand the clarification of roles. And I think that's what conflict, we're talking about, one of the cause of conflict is that roles are not clarified. But also, too, when folk may feel intimidated, reducing conflict. And so for a lot of birth parents who deal with the system, have dealt with the system all the time, a lot of them feel powerless. You know.
Some of them feel powerless, and some
right.
of them feel like, you know, they have the power.
Well, is it our genuine power, is a pseudo power? And what I mean by that is that they feel inward, they feel powerless because you're dealing with this huge system, and so the little power that I have is I can make an allegation against this provider. I can, because that's the little power I have, or possibly even have another child if I feel that I'm losing this child and I've lost that battle. I have power over my body. You know, so when we look at power and what power do I have, what power I don't have. So I'm thinking in terms of a relationship and reducing conflict. You know, I think parents, you know, and I'm talking about birth parents here, sometimes it's hard for them to put themselves in the shoes of the foster parent. So hopefully the foster parent can put themselves in the shoes of the birth parents and approach conflict resolution from that place right there.
I think one of the things that was very, very helpful that I recognize is that the biological parent in a situation of foster care is going through a lot.
Okay.
Regardless of, you know, what brought that point on. It's a sense, it's almost in some sense a failure. And so you have to be sensitive to that and know that the sense of failure may manifest in different ways. It may, you know, be shown in aggression and anger, and it's going to cause some conflict. But there's also our responsibility as a foster parent to kind of help them understand that, you know, this is a process we're going to get through together.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead.
So let's look at the relationship between the foster parent and the child who is potentially defying the foster parent rules because the parents say, go back there and tear that place up. You don't have to do anything that foster parent tell you because they ain't your mama, they ain't your daddy. How does a foster parent address that situation to minimize conflict there?
That's definitely a very difficult situation because you definitely, there's some things you just can't tolerate. And you cannot tolerate a level of defiance that is jeopardizing your home. Not just you might have other children in the home that now that behavior being displayed can, you know, trigger behavior in siblings or other children in place. And so you have to kind of weigh it out, and you have to have strategies based on, you know, what are important. Is the issue important? Is it the relationship that's important? What is the basis of what we want to get at here? Do you want to change the behavior? What direction do you want to take this? Are you trying to discredit the parent? Because sometimes when you have foster homes, they tear down biological parents and say, oh, you know, your mama told you that because she a crackhead, and you know, she ain't got good sense, and you know, she's stupid. You want to make sure.
So resolving conflict, you don't want to get the name calling and saying making derogatory statements about that child.
Well, you want to balance it out with positivity.
Okay.
You know, you have to have a counter for the negative.
Okay.
And it's going to take an exemplary amount of strength to do so, because when you have outside entities, you know, essentially running your home, because whether you're there or you're across the town and your child can pick up the phone and you can tell them to do something, they do it. You're running the home. You have to be careful. You have to be mindful of how you approach it. You have to ensure that at the end we may not have the best relationship, but people are going to be safe.
Okay.
Because that is definitely the priority, and you'll be able to continue on with your license.
Well, thanks a lot, Ms. Grant, for being on the show.
I cannot mention one thing.
Sure.
Because we talked about some things that can help our young people with conflict resolution, I want to, encourage our parents to get their children involved in extracurricular activities, because that's very, very healthy. JCPAA, Janus College Preparatory and Arts Academy, is located in the lower level of Grand Avenue Mall, and they provide their dance studio.
Okay, so slow down and say that again. What's the name of the company?
It's JCPAA.
Mm-hmm.
Arts, performing arts. So theater, dance, poetry, hip hop dance. They have things for adults.
Do you have a number?
The number is 414-763-9061. Valerie Benton is the director there. And also an option for adults. I know we got Future Fathers Uniquely Thriving to Understand Responsibility and Education with Reverend Fuller, who is over at
Word of Hope.
He's at the Word of Hope, and you can reach him at 447-1965. And because it's important, again, that we bring a holistic approach for both our young people as well as our adults.
Well, that was the closing statement. Thank you for tuning in to Fresh Start Today. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed, and we'll be back in the studio on next Wednesday. Until then, be safe and be blessed.